Hello everyone and welcome back to the GeekWave. This is the low budget show. It's the show so low it has no budget. I of course am your host with the most, Aaron Barker. Don't know why I said it like that. And I've been having quite the day. So I recorded the GeekWave earlier and it was not on this topic. This topic is about cryptozoic creatures. I recorded one about dinosaurs in movies, and honestly, the files didn't process right and my microphone fucked up, which sucks, and I lost all that data and all that stuff, and I was like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. And I was so angry about it, and I was like, I don't want to talk about it right now, so we'll come back to dinosaurs maybe next year, we'll see. But instead I was like, let's talk about something similar that I enjoy equally, and that of course is cryptozoic creatures, things like Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster, all this great stuff. And I love it, and honestly I believe they exist. I believe somewhere in this world there are things we can't explain that I seriously enjoy talking about and thinking of. And I think that's pretty cool. So another thing to discuss, I actually two things. First off, this microphone's a piece of shit and it's pissing me off. I am getting some new equipment hopefully in the next month. I bought a amazing computer. I can't wait to try that out. And if it works as well as I hope it does, then some amazing content's on the way. And then currently where I live in the world, in Canada, it is the hottest that my city has ever been in since the 60s, so I have some air conditionings and fans going on in the background. If you hear any of that pick up on the microphone, I apologize. It's just, that's where I am right now. That is literally how hot it is here. I'm sweating up a storm, and I've just been sitting in my air-conditioned room recording this. So, we always talk about the news before we jump into our main topic, and we got a lot of stuff to talk about this week. We got a couple Disney things, a couple trailers, a couple announcements, a lot of weird stuff. So let's start off by talking about this really bizarre news, and that is that Luke Evans and Josh Gad are going to be starring in the Gaston Prequel. That's right, that Beauty and the Beast movie apparently was so beloved by everyone that now it's getting a prequel. And Gaston, a character that we shouldn't try to make likable because he's supposed to be an example of toxic masculinity and how he is just a terrible dude. I mean, I get Cruella because, you can make that a feminist icon. But why would you try to do that with Gaston? The point is he sucks. Unless we have a scene where we see a book run at his parents and push them off a cliff, I don't give a shit. Like, there's nothing interesting you can do with Gaston that's going to make me like it. If it's a musical, maybe. That could be kind of fun. But it's like, really? Gaston and LeFou? That's the one? I think that's a dumb idea, but I don't know. For all I know, it could work really well. But I just okay, you can't do that much interesting of Gaston. I'll give you Cruella and Maleficent. They're kind of cool. But I'm not going to give you Gaston because he sucks. He genuinely sucks. So, I don't know. We'll see what happens there. And on that note, too, we do have some more Disney news because they were all out it today. And I'm surprised with all the stuff they were doing. First off, we got Rachel Zegler, who just starred in West Side Story. Was she the one cast in Shazam! Fury of the Gods? I believe she was. She's tapped on to play Snow White in the Snow White remake at Disney, which I'm like, that's an interesting choice because you're going to make a lot of people pissed for no reason. First off, I feel like this shouldn't be something I have to say. Her name is Snow White. She's not named Snow White because she has white skin. She's named Snow White because that's her name. So who gives a shit what color her skin is? If the actress is good for the role, that means she should get the role. Who cares what she looks like if she's good for the part? I think that's important. I also think, really, Snow White, this is the one we're going back to? I mean, it makes sense. Cinderella was still my favorite of all these. I think that one was really cool and interesting. And this, I'm just like, I don't know. It's kind of weird. Kind of an interesting choice, but it could work. Snow White kind of be fun. I'd love to play one of the dwarves if Disney wants to hire some random, just some schmuck on the internet to play Happy or Dopey. Actually, I don't want to be Dopey. I don't give off Dopey vibes. Maybe Grumpy. Is it Grumpy or Angry? I could play I could play him. Grumpy. I could play Grumpy. I'm pissed already. I lost a lot of files and I'm sweating my balls off here. I could play Grumpy. But this is cool. Rachel Zegler, she's a good actress. I can't wait to see her in West Side Story. If you're doing something fun of Snow White, that's always fun. She's one of my favorite princesses anyways. I think it could be really cool. I actually enjoy that idea. I think there's a lot to explore there and could go into some very interesting places. But some really weird stuff Disney also announced was that Scarlett Johansson, probably coming off the success of what Black Widow and the MCU did for her career, she's going to be starring in and producing a Hollywood Tower of Terror movie, which I'm like, this seems so fucking late that why are we even bothering? They got rid of the ride at the California Adventure Park and replaced it with Guardians of the Galaxy. Who gives a fuck? It's irrelevant. Because what? Guardians is timely? This will piss me off till the end of time. I hate that they got rid of the Hollywood Tower of Terror. But why do it now after we lost the ride? Nobody was sitting on a really good Tower of Terror story, right? Nobody was sitting on that just waiting for the right time to produce it. The right time would have been like when we still had the ride, right? This is just weird to me. Like, why? Why is this? I don't know. It's just so weird to me. I like Scarlett Johansson's not an actress I love, but I'll watch it because I think she can genuinely do something interesting and she can be talented in some stuff. If this is like a period piece and it's set in like maybe the 50s of like that bright Hollywood era, she's like the starlet that everybody falls in love with, I think then it could be something a little more compelling than what we could potentially see. But I'm just like, oh, I don't know. This just seems too little too late for me. I'm a big fan of that classic ride, and I genuinely love stuff about Hollywood, but I just can't be excited about this because I'm just like, you are either sitting on this script for a very long time, or somebody said we should do this because we own it and we need to look like we're doing a new property, and since we don't have the ride anymore, people might think we're being original. And I don't know which one it is, and I'm just thinking, this can't be good. This can't be something compelling. But I hope so, because I love the ride and I love the premise. I'm just not a Scarlett Johansson fan. If it was anybody else, really, I'd be like, yeah, let's go. But I don't think she's a good actress. I don't. I've never liked her in that much. Except like Hail Caesar. And I guess Hail Caesar would be like the closest representation to a Hollywood Tower of Terror movie. First off, you can't call it Tower of Terror because that's a stupid title. The Hollywood Hotel would be a better title. But we'll see. Maybe it'll be set in the real world and like famous people will come to visit it. Who knows? Scarlett Johansson could be playing Marilyn Monroe for all we know. It could be good, but it probably won't be. Anyways, we got this new trailer for a series that I'm very excited to talk about, and that, of course, is Jellystone. Now, Jellystone is what happens when you bring all the classic Hanna-Barbera characters, Yogi and Boo Boo, Augie Doggy, Snagglepuss, Jabberjaw, all of them come into the new modern day, and we're getting a new cartoon of them. It's one of the selling points of HBO Max for me, because I was like, yes, I want to see this so badly. I love these characters. The trailer was okay. It's coming in July, and I'm like, I'm still not convinced. There was some good jokes in there, like when Boo Boo's like, I'm being sued for malpractice. I'm like, that's funny. That's a good joke, but the animation just doesn't hype me up like I wish it did. It just looks standard. It doesn't have anything that compelling to it, and I would just be like, okay, this is... I'm excited that Hanna-Barbera cartoons are coming back into prominence in this era, and I'm like, I can get behind the animation. I've gotten soft on it a little bit. When I first saw it, I'm like, this looks like shit, but the more I've seen the trailer, the more I'm like, I'm easing into it softly and quietly. It could be unique. I just wish Jellystone did more for me because I was super excited for this property. And you can damn well be sure we'll be doing a Hanna-Barbera cartoon, GeekWave, coming up probably in the next few months. I think this was interesting, and I hope it lands. I hope it works, because I want to see this back in prominence for a long time to come. Speaking of something coming back into prominence, this surprised me to no end. Lily Collins, who's either in your favorite movie if you confuse her with Lily James, or is in your worst movie if you confuse her with Lily James, she will be taking on the role of Polly Pocket or whatever in a Polly Pocket movie. First off, like, wow, that's a bold choice. I remember growing up, Polly Pockets were the thing my sister had, and I'm like, yeah, okay, it's kind of fun. You can put a Barbie in your pocket and dress her up and play with her however you want. That's kind of fun. But I'm like, a movie? I don't know how this could look. I'm like, it's an interesting choice. It's bold. It's a bold move, Cotton. We'll see if it pays off. And I'm like, you can't do that much with a Polly Pocket movie. That being said, if you play it tongue-in-cheek, it could be the best thing ever made. I don't know. It's just like, that's an interesting choice. And I love the idea. I love the idea of Polly Pocket. I love the idea of Barbie. I've always said if I was going to ever get into another toy line, it would have been Barbie. I think you could do something cool if you play up the little campy factor just enough where it works that way. But Polly Pocket, Lily Collins, that's kind of fun. I'd be interested to see how that works. I'm not going to say it's impressive or blows me away, but it could be something unique enough where I'm interested in the concept, which, what else can you ask for from stuff like this? We got these things all the time, so Polly Pocket and Lily Collins, what do you got for me? And our final piece of news, we venture into the world of Transformers again, because guess what? The Rise of the Beast is happening. Transformers 7, 6, or 5, or 9. I can't remember at this point what's in canon or what's not, but we're doing Beast Wars next, because of course we are. And we got a couple announcements. Anthony Ramos, coming off the success of Into the Heights, he will be starring as the lead character, which I'm like, yeah, he's way more interesting than Shia LaBeouf for Mark Wahlberg, so throw him in. I don't give a shit. Was Mark Wahlberg in the 5th, 6th one? I don't even know how many there are. They're all garbage, honestly. They're all so annoying. But it looks like Ron Perlman will be voicing Optimus Primal, which means Peter Cullen is not coming back to do the character, which makes me go, this isn't going to be good at all. I'm like, you can't make this work. It's not going to sound interesting or cool in the slightest, but you never know. It could surprise you at every turn. It just might be a little bit different. We'll have to wait and see. But I'm like, I don't care about the next Transformers. It's too little too late for this franchise. You should start over like Polly Pocket is and see what comes next in the ever-changing landscape of film. And those are all the news pieces. Like I said, there's a lot of Disney stuff going on right now, which is kind of exciting, and a lot of interesting just areas to explore of toy properties coming to film. Weird shit, but let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to jump into the world of the urban legends, of myth, of fun, of the skies, of the sea, of our forests, of our lives, and a big old frog. So when we come back, let's jump into the coolest Cryptozoic creatures. Obviously, we all know there's a vast list of like urban legends and Cryptozoic creatures I could get into, but I picked a couple of my favorites. Not only that, I picked a couple of the ones that I think are the most prominent. So let's talk about them for a little bit, and then I'll give my opinions. And full disclosure, I know I said this at the top of the show, and I'm going to say it now. I believe all of these things exist. So I mean, if you don't, that's fine, but I think it's fun to speculate on these kind of things. And there's a couple ones in here that are just random weirdness, and there's some that I genuinely love, and I think they are admirable, interesting people. They're not people, they're things. They're alive, though, and they exist. So let's dive into it. Let's start with the number one bad boy. That, of course, is something I'm clumping into about 3 different categories because, in my opinion, they could all be related or they could all be separate. I'm talking about the Bigfoot, which is just the Sasquatch, which is just a Yeti. Now, I love the idea of this thing existing because it seems plausible that somewhere in the Alps or like in the wilderness, wherever, there's an unstudied species adjacent to man that could exist, and they could be a little more gorilla or like ape-like in their presentation, and I just think it's pretty cool that this creature could exist. I think they're really interesting, they're really funny, they got a lot going for them, and that's kind of a cool thing to explore. And Bigfoot is just so cool. I've always liked the concept of that, just like a creature that exists just randomly in the world that could be anything or anything and just has its own habitat that it just wanders about, and people keep saying they've seen it and know what it looks like, but it's just like a mindless giant that wanders around doing absolutely nothing of importance. That's just really fun to me, and I really enjoy that idea, and I've always liked Bigfoot. I'm in an area that's semi-close to where Bigfoot has potentially been sighted before, which is kind of a cool thing to think about, that like, oh, the character, the myth of Bigfoot could potentially be close to me. I like that. If I had more time and dedication, I'd probably travel to known sightings and actually investigate myself to see where it was. I genuinely like the character. I like the idea that it stands for, and I think there's a lot of cool stuff with Bigfoot. It's a great design that we semi-know. I say design like it's a thing that's just made by man, but you never know, right? I think Bigfoot's a cool myth. I absolutely enjoy it. I think it's very fun. I also enjoy the idea of the Sasquatch, which is just Bigfoot. Bigfoot would be a Sasquatch if we're going to categorize things at these things. I don't know. I think this is a cool myth, just like a big hairy thing that walks in the middle of our forest, and the Yeti's the one in like the snow mountains that could just be down there watching people from afar. That's really cool. I think those are really interesting stuff, and I hope this video doesn't just come across as me like, yeah, these things are sick, because they are, and I kind of just want to say like, yeah, let's talk about them, let's think about them a little bit, let's put them in the open. I think that stuff's really cool. I love these ideas, and maybe at the end of this video, I'll talk about some of my personal encounters with stuff like this. I don't have any major ones, just things that you could potentially explore as to be events kind of connected to these people. I think that's really fun. Bigfoot's awesome. I love the character. I love the design. I love everything about Bigfoot. But I don't know why I put it so high on my list, but I guess we're going to talk about this one right now. My absolute favorite Cryptozoic creature, my absolute favorite urban legend type of creature, is the Mothman. Now, a little behind the scenes into my life and everything I do, I'm currently working on a comic book for a writer. I won't get into it too much, but this publisher was like, hey, would you like to work on a comic book? It's kind of like this kind of story. And the Mothman did become a character in that story because I connected to it, and I love the idea so much of this giant kind of like red-eyed glowing figure that just emerges in these places. And when the Mothman gets to this certain place, or there's potential sightings involving the Mothman, and this is something I've explored and I've kind of put in my own writing, it brings tragedy with it. You know, the bridge collapsing, those events happening with a dam in China, all these different events, even Chernobyl. There's events that some people might say you could see the Mothman being near Chernobyl before the accident happened, which I'm like, you could potentially build up so many cool things with that idea that the Mothman is something that brought upon Chernobyl and these national tragedies. I think that's really cool. And from a design standpoint, just like that, I know there's a bunch of different interpretations of the Mothman. I like the one where it's just like kind of like no arms, and it's just like the big wings, the glowing red eyes that kind of like blend in, you can't really see its face. And I love the concept of the character. I've always thought Mothman was really interesting, really satisfying. The idea of like a giant moth. If you guys don't know this either, I don't know if I've talked about it a lot in other channels like this, but I do not like moths. If there's one thing that scares me next to a pelican, it's a moth. But Mothman was just, there's some like, it's almost like a Shakespearean character where every action brings tragedy with it. I've always just connected and liked that idea. I think there's something so fun about that, so unique about that experience that could just be really cool. So I was said it kind of like, oh, maybe I'll talk about it at the end of the video. I'll talk about it right now. I think if you were to view some stuff in the real world as things that have happened involving the Mothman, I think I had a sighting of something very similar. When I was working late one night, I was a haul truck driver. I was I think it was like 2 o'clock at night, and I saw something just swoosh past my truck, and it was over 3 feet. I don't know how big it was, but it looked like it was over 3 feet. It was like a big hulking shadow just swooping right by and just like flew right overhead super fast. It was just like a blur that came by, and it could be a number of things, but I did see the slightest tint of something red hiding beneath that blackness. And I was like, in my own mind, I'm like, hey, that could have been a Mothman sighting. Of course it wasn't, because it'd be silly to believe that it was, but in my own mind, that's something I thought was kind of fun. Just an idea I could just be like, yeah, I had a sort of a Mothman encounter just with that idea. I've always liked the Mothman. I think out of everything on this list, I love the idea the most, next to another one that I can't wait to get into. I think the Mothman is going to resonate with a lot of people in more ways than some of the other people on this list. But let's talk about probably the number one that kind of started this entire creed of everything. That, of course, is the Loch Ness Monster. Now, the Loch Ness Monster, again, it's a great concept. It's a great idea. A giant dinosaur, prehistoric creature that floats around in some, water somewhere and it's terrorizing some people. That is great. I think that alone is a really cool story and a great idea to play with, and it's probably real. We have not explored every single inch in depth of the ocean, so it's possible, there's a large possibility that these kind of things exist, that this is something that could happen. If we went down to the very bottom of the deepest point in the ocean, we might be surprised at what we see down there. So if there's like some secret connection hiding this mythical creature in this big bad way, we wouldn't know. So it could exist. And the design, of course, is just very classic water dinosaur, which is very cool to see. It adds so much more interesting stuff to the characterization of the Loch Ness Monster. I think that's a very enjoyable thing to explore. I enjoy the Loch Ness Monster. I love seeing it. I love seeing photos of potentially random things appearing in the ocean that could be connected to the creature, like a fin, like a head, something peering out. Of course, you have that iconic image of the head peering out of the water from who knows how long ago at this point. I can't even remember. I think creatures like this do exist. Is it specifically this? No. But the possibility that a creature this scale and this powerful exists is very plausible. It is very plausible and very likely something that could potentially happen. And I think that is something we should be proud of, that, hey, these kind of things can exist. They do exist. We should just kind of freak out a little bit, but keep our heads cool at the idea of what these could be. The Loch Ness Monster is a very interesting one. There with Mothman and Bigfoot, these are the big three. These are the ones I've studied the most. I say studied when I haven't really looked into it, but I love them the most. I think they're the coolest. I think they're the most interesting, but they're not the only ones we have on this list, so let's get into it. Of course, we have to talk about the El Chupacabra. This one, I think, has appeared in more myths and legends than any other, really, because this is a character that could go back to old folklore stories, that could appear anywhere you wanted it to. The El Chupacabra, just a creature that kills big animals, kills coyotes and shit, roams the desert. Again, kind of like the Jersey Devil in that sense. I know there's like some maybe potential relation between the two, that like the Jersey Devil could connect to the El Chupacabra. Some people have those ideas. You could look at both being an allegory for the devil, which I'm like, that's kind of fun to explore too. I think that could be interesting. And this one, to me, I think more so than like Bigfoot, Mothman, or the Loch Ness Monster, when it comes to El Chupacabra, it's just like a creature. And there's so many random creatures that we have yet to discover and explore that it could just not even be like a one-off. It could be like a subcategory of like a wild animal, of like a wild dog, of like a horse or something. It could be really a number of things. We wouldn't really know what it is. And I think that's kind of an interesting angle to play with. It's probably the one I'd be the most scared of if I were to like encounter it. Bigfoot seems like an idiot. Loch Ness Monster, you have to be in water. I just won't go in water. Mothman, I would love to see, even if it brought tragedy to me. El Chupacabra seems like a feisty little bitch that's going to come at me and try to cut my face off. That's scary. I think that's genuinely freaky and weird, but I honestly love it. I really like that idea, and I think it's kind of cool. And the same with the Jersey Devil. I think there's some similarities there. This is just like more like another haunting creature, a little more smaller in stature, that could potentially just be this thing that terrorizes you. Both of these things are very plausible to exist. They could be things that you should be freaked out by. Maybe you're not, but I don't know what you like or what you're into, but these things are kind of cool. They're kind of interesting to explore, and I like the El Chupacabra. But I also wanted to put this on my list, and I know this could probably have its own video, and I might do a video talking about this at some point, depending on how good this Cryptozoic one does. Martians. Now, this one, it's not really a Cryptozoic creature, but I wanted to put it in here anyways, because Martians, to me, represent the cultural zeitgeist of just being afraid of something you can't see. It's just like, we know there's an enemy out there, but if we can't put our face on it, then does it really exist? And that's maybe not Cryptozoic, but it's in that category, too, of unexplained things we see. I think I might want to do a video talking about, like, flying saucers and all, like, this potential stuff that we could have aliens being exist. But I'm thinking about, like, the little green men. What's called Martians? The little green men. These are these things that we know exist, potentially. I say know exist, but I believe in Bigfoot. I believe in spirits and aberrations. I believe in aliens. I believe the galaxy and the universe is infinitely expanding and is too large that other celestial life has to exist somewhere, whatever form that takes. But in this case of the little green men just running around terrorizing our planet, hiding among us, I think it's not likely, but it's not unlikely. It's something that could happen, you know? Like, there's been studies done. There's been literally, like, Area 51. You know, and there's the meme about, like, storming the place, but it exists for a reason, because there's a cultural idea that something shady did happen there, and, like, maybe they're hiding something, whatever that could be, whether it means that this creature is already deceased, like, long deceased, and we're hiding a corpse or something. The idea of Martians existing on our planet is not uncommon, and it's something that potentially could happen and could potentially exist. And, you know, I mean, I haven't had any experiences where I've seen, like, a flying saucer or a UFO or anything, but the idea of a Martian among us, it's just that idea, like, that fear of not seeing the enemy in front of you, that anything you see is real, but you can't see the real enemy, and that's what a Martian would be. And I don't know. I think out of everything, I was like, the little green men, maybe not something that would exist, but I wouldn't hold it against you. Science fiction always comes from this place, and maybe it's not the little green men we're familiar with in our science fiction, but it could be something very similar. It could be a type of person we haven't seen. It could be a type of idea we haven't seen. This idea that there is this hidden conspiracy by our government, not implausible, something that could actually exist, but we'll have to wait and see what actually happens because of that. I love the idea of these unidentified flying objects. I love the idea that we are not alone in this universe, and maybe there's not more meaning to life or to existence, but there is other things in there we could potentially learn to explore and inhabit and experience. That's kind of cool. And I think a lot of that has to come from the idea of Martians existing, because they're cool little creatures, and I think if they were among us, not that we would have found them by now, but if we did find them and the government was hiding it, it wouldn't be that much of a shocker, would it? Because we know what the government hides from the public. Maybe the Martians are just up there too. And that brings me to some more folklore stuff. Of course, we're talking about the Wendigo. Wendigo is a big, scary creature that eats people. It's like a mutated person that didn't really get like something and then it turned into like Wendigo. I think they're kind of cool. Again, it's one of those things in popular culture that kind of like took over and had its own identity after a while. Everyone's like doing their own Wendigo thing, which I don't believe is wrong. If you have a story to tell with the Wendigo idea, you should go ahead and tell it. I think that's a really cool thing to explore. It's something really fun to play with and to endure, and I really enjoy that idea. The Wendigo, again, it's like this creepy idea of like a person broken to this point where they could come and attack you and become this cannibalistic monster. That's horrific. A lot of these creatures are these horrific beings. That's why they're urban legends. They're these things you should be scared of, that you should be afraid of, that could come and potentially kill you and harm you and affect you in so many visceral and real ways that you wouldn't know what to do with yourself. That is a genuinely scary thing, and the Wendigo is just a disturbing animal, this disturbing creature. There's been countless different depictions of it, like a big hulking creature, a big skinny type man. Those kind of things, they're a little freaky, and I love it a lot. It's just like, yeah, if you meet one, you're probably going to die. Out of everything on this list, though, I do think the Wendigo wouldn't exist just because it's too unlikely. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I say this with everything so far, but just because I'm like, there's no way it exists, there's no way it doesn't exist. Like, anything is really possible in our time, in our landscape of things. We have more technology than ever, so things might have come into light more recently, but whatever. It's unlikely to exist, but I think it could be possible. I think there's the idea of something similar to that existing. Whatever that takes, whatever that would be actually, I don't know. Again, the most likely ones to me are the Loch Ness Monster and Bigfoot. I know that's weird to think because any one of these things could potentially exist. There's always like mutated animals in the world. Look at some like giant rabbits and different sized pigs and all these things that exist. There's always these freaks of nature that come about, and we could always explore these type of ideas as things like that. And we don't really know if they would exist, if they'd be different, but there's always these different things. But a monkey-like creature existing that's slightly humanoid, 7 feet tall, is walking and hiding in plain sight, that could happen. The unexplored depths of our waters could really bring up different creatures that we haven't seen before, so the Loch Ness Monster wouldn't be out of the realm of reason, I should say. And I got a couple more I do want to talk about. Let's bring up a couple more, like, I guess kind of like myth stuff. The Thunderbird. This to me is very plausible because you could look back to the time with a dinosaur and be like, there was a lot of big animals, like big crocodiles, big snakes, big bugs. The idea of a giant bird is not out of the realm of possibility. Maybe there's some giant birds that we haven't seen there, and there's been big birds before, like when some places I've seen there's like huge eagles and different types of owls. Not a big owl, but there's like different types of birds, like the ostrich even, the emu, the cassowary. These are big birds. If those could fly, we'd be goddamn terrified if they could fly. Now, I'm not saying they do fly, but like if they did, like those ideas, again, there's something to that's pretty scary, pretty intense and frightening. And the idea of like a giant bird, like bigger than a building, that genuinely terrifies me because I have this thing about birds. I hate birds. I do not like birds in any regards of the word. They scare me a lot. And a giant bird that could swallow me whole, that's terrifying. I hate that idea. Again, though, it's probably something that did exist. If there's a historical inaccuracy somewhere, then maybe not. But it's like, it's plausible that the amount of things we've seen that were giant in the prehistoric era did exist. So a giant bird called the Thunderbird, that doesn't surprise me. It's the same as like the Megalodon. It's like, it's a big shark. They went extinct, but it's still something that existed. It's still something that could potentially kill you if you let it. I don't think that's wrong or anything. I'm just like, these probably happened. These things probably existed. That's pretty scary to me. That freaks me out. So I did have one here that I was kind of connected to the stuff happening with the Martian. And you could do this talking about conspiracy theories, which is like UFO stuff I'd love to talk about too, and conspiracy theories I'd love to talk about as well. But let's look at this idea I do say, about lizard people, because I think this one is really fun too. The idea that some humanoids have been replaced with reptilian doppelgangers. A really funny idea. It's great science fiction. It's great humor. I want to bring it up because it's just silly. It's not plausible in any regards of the word. I think it's dumb and campy and funny. But hey, Zuckerberg's a weird dude, you know? A lot of weird people out there. If somebody was reptilian, we probably wouldn't notice if they just acted weird. I think that's pretty interesting. It's a fun thing to explore. It's silly and campy, but it's got some funny stuff in it. I think that's kind of interesting, kind of engaging, kind of cute. I don't know about you guys. I think there's something to explore there. And I got two more I want to end on, and honestly, these two I think are just really silly and fun that I love. These ones are easily debunked, but I love talking about it. When you look at things like the Mothman and Bigfoot, it's like, what if a gorilla and a man were mixed? What if a moth and a man were mixed? Well, what about the goat man? You know, Mr. Tomness from Narnia. What if he existed in our world? What would he look like? How would he act? He would just be a goat man. And I think this one is just like, there has been, you know, going back to like Greek myths and everything about like the Minotaur and the satyrs and all that, there is the idea of a goat man existing. Does it actually exist? Probably not, because it's silly and stupid. And I don't think it would exist today. You can't hide that identity. More so because if it's like a goat the size of a man, you're gonna know that exists. That one you can't hide really well. But I do want to end things talking about my special little guy. Probably one of my favorite, right up there with Mothman and Bigfoot. I absolutely love the idea of the Loveland Frogman. I think this design, this idea of the Loveland Frogman is absolutely hilarious. Just a giant frog. Just a giant frog. I love that idea. Just a big old frog just walking about. It's hilarious. I love it. Everyone's interpretation of this giant frog that just randomly walks across the streets or walks in these swamps. I love that because we have seen freaks of nature, these random creatures and animals that can be potentially larger than their normal counterpart. It does stand to reason that somewhere along the history of existence, there has been a ginormous fucking frog. A frog that walks on its hind legs? Maybe not. Maybe this person just, watched like the dancing frog from the Looney Tunes too much. What's his name? Michigan P. something. I mean, I just think this one is just so fun to me because I'm like, yes, this is what you should do. Frogs are funny. Let's talk about it. I honestly believe this exists. Is it a big frog that walks on its hind legs and looks like a fucking creep? No. Do I believe there's like some big 2-foot frogs out there that if you stretch them out on their back legs, they look like the size of an adult male? Probably. That is very believable. We probably haven't seen every species of frog ever. There's probably some ginormous ones that are almost extinct that we haven't seen. Walking in Loveland, I should say. Probably not. But it's possible. Some weird camera angles can trick your mind to think a lot of things. And the idea that there's a big fucking frog is not the craziest thing to believe in. It's possible. It's believable. I think it's cool. So I love cryptozoic creatures. I love talking about these things and exploring these ideas. I watch documentaries all the time. I read comic books about it. I study them. There's a line of action figures I'd love to get into with them. I think these things are so cool and interesting, and there's so much to explore in our own planet that we don't really think about enough. And I think that is a very enjoyable thing to just see and deal with and just have so much fun to look at. It's really exciting. So I don't have that many recommendations for you. I always end this show with some recommendations. I do want to say there's a line of like little collectible figures called Little Cryptkins. They're from the Cryptozoic company, and they're really cute and fun. I'm going to put a picture up on screen. I recommend checking these out because they're just a really fun line of little cute figures and explores these kind of ideas in like a little cute plushy way. I think it's really fun. So, do you guys have any encounters with these kind of creatures, or do you have any thoughts and feelings on like Bigfoot or Martians or lizard people or Thunderbirds? I'd love to hear them. Leave it in the comments below, and let's talk about it more. So if this video does well enough, I might come back and talk about conspiracy theories. I might come back and talk about UFOs. And if you have any further questions on my thoughts on some of these creatures, I know I didn't go in super depth on them, but they're really fun to think about, aren't they? I think so, at least. I like that a lot. So thank you guys so much for watching this rendition of GeekWave. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. If you're listening to this on the podcast feed, please give us a rating over there. It definitely helps out. And, if you have any suggestions for stuff you'd like to hear me talk about, please put it in the comments. Email me about it. I'd love to hear what you guys want to hear me talk about. And as always, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. And I will catch you guys in the next one. But before that, you can find me on Patreon, Twitter, Instagram, all that good stuff. And I'll catch you in the next one. Have fun. Stay safe. Good luck.